Sara F Costa is a poet who's captured the hearts of readers all around the world with her remarkable work, from winning the Gloria di Santana International Literary Prize to translating contemporary Chinese poetry. Sara's talents know no bounds, and we're excited to talk to her about her latest work, River Being, Bodily God, which is now available in English with River Red. So, good morning, Sara. How are you today?
Good morning, Toby. Thank you so much for having me here. I am doing great. And I'm happy to have this opportunity to just talk about my work to English speakers, or in this case, English readers.
Yeah. So what was the inspiration behind your latest work, River Being Bodily God?
So as you can see from both the cover and the title, it is about conceiving. It is about my experience when I was pregnant. I was actually pregnant when I was in China in 2019. Wow. And I had all of these feelings and thoughts. I was writing a lot by the time. And somehow when a woman is pregnant, like, she's more creative, because she's already creating something and producing something. So this came with that. But I had other poetry collections published before. It's just that they were not translated into English. They were only in my native language, in Portuguese, and only in Portugal. So I know that I read recently someone writing about the fact that River Being Bodily God was my debut English collection. Well, it is my English collection. As English collection, it is a debut, but as a poetry collection, it is not, because it's my sixth poetry collection.
Wow. And that's quite a deep analogy, saying that you're already creating something when you're pregnant. Why do you think it is that women seem to be more creative during pregnancy? Is it some kind of hormonal thing, some nature thing, or is it like some kind of accidental thing?
It is pretty mystical if you think about it, but at the same time, it is also very natural, right? Because you are conceiving something. So creativity, I mean, I wrote this book, not all of the book, not the entire book, but I wrote partially this book while I was pregnant. And then I wrote the other part after that, after I had the baby. But I think that, it's pretty natural as well. You get very thoughtful about what is happening to yourself, even though we heard that it's the most natural thing in the world. But at the same time, it feels so surreal. It feels so unreal to have just, another creature inside of you developing. And so it is a very contemplative space, I think.
You, of course, do a lot of Chinese poetry, and you mentioned that you were pregnant in China. So what was it that drew you to Chinese poetry?
So I started writing before I learned Mandarin. So I went to university. I decided to learn Japanese and Mandarin mostly because I wanted to travel. Actually, that was my thought behind it. If I had to decide to do something today, I would be like, okay, I should go to some engineer or computer science, because that's what gets a job. But at the time, I just wanted to travel the world, and this was an opportunity. So I went to university, learned Mandarin and learned Japanese. And at some point, I had some contact with first with Japanese literature. That is something that I love. And I started a blog by that time about Japanese literature. But then I realized that, much of the Japanese literature that we know, and it's more famous, like haiku from Basho or something. It comes from the golden age of Chinese literature during the Tang and Song dynasties. I started to get interested in this kind of poetry, the classical Chinese poetry, because of its relation with so many of the characteristics that actually we have in Western literature, for instance, in symbolism or decadentism, or when we have the French poets like Mallarmé, Verlaine. There's a lot of natural elements with human elements, and there's a lot of symbolism that comes from there, which is amazing because the time period is so different. So I really got interested in Chinese poetry too. Although what you're referring to, I think it's my translation of contemporary Chinese poets into Portuguese. This is different because I realized that it is easier to find Chinese classical poetry translated, but it's not so easy to find contemporary artists translated. And because I had a contact with so many of them when I was living in Beijing, then I decided to do just that, to work on the Chinese contemporary poetry and translate it into Portuguese.
Is it hard to learn Mandarin? Because as an English-speaking person, most European languages like French or Spanish, you can look at a word and approximate what you think it means. Whereas Chinese, that's kind of impossible because it's a completely different structure.
Yeah, absolutely. Chinese is not phonetic, so it means that you look at the Chinese character and you will not realize how to say it. Like, you will not guess the sound of it. You need to learn what it means, how to write it, and then how to read it. And that's why you can have like a Chinese character that can be read in very different ways, in many different ways. Like you have in the north, you would say in a way, in the south, you would say in a different way because of the different dialects. Also in Japan, you can have the same character because actually Japanese characters came from China, so especially kanji. So they are exactly the same. They are classical Chinese characters. So yeah, you can read them in a different way, but the meaning is kind of the same, which is interesting. But yeah, it's not like learning an alphabet and that's it. No, you have to learn every single word. That's why it gets more, it's more a hard-working job. You need to really focus and practice a lot.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to try and pronounce this word. Your book, Transfiguration da Fome, won the Gloria de Santana International Literary Prize for the best work of poetry published in Portuguese-speaking countries in 2018. How did you feel when you won the award? And how's it impacted your career as a poet?
Yeah, actually, I was living in Beijing by the time because I knew about this literary prize when I was in Beijing 2019, and I couldn't even attend the ceremony. I remember that it was inside of a church, which is a bit strange because this book is very satirical about religion.
Yeah.
But then they projected my image, and I just hoped, like, okay, can you please project my image, like where the cross of Jesus Christ is, just because it would be awesome to have my image projected in the church during the ceremony. No, but it was a good impact. Actually, just being a Portuguese poet living in China was kind of good for my recognition, let's say it like that. But winning this award was quite amazing, and very, very happy to have achieved that.
And you've attended quite a lot of literary festivals, haven't you?
Yes.
So what have been some of your favourites?
I like the ones in India because the first one I went in India was in Kolkata, and Kolkata. Well, that's where I met some of the people that then made this book possible in English, because it was actually published in India. So this is an interesting story, like a Portuguese writer going to China and then getting her first English poetry book translated in India and published there. It is quite amazing. I like it because it gives me this international setup and makes me feel like the citizen of the world. India festivals were great. Both share poetry evenings, and most recently the Bangalore Literary Festival from Asian Pacific Writers and Translators, which is an organization that I also belong to. And I like them a lot just because they are a bit different.
Travelling to all these different countries and living in some of them, do you find that's influenced your style? You've maybe absorbed parts of their different poetry cultures?
That's interesting because I have been reading some of the analysts of the Portuguese contemporary poetry in Portugal, and they actually realized that no, not much. But this has been like this since forever. Like, I am doing this PhD thesis about one Portuguese author that went to Macau and stayed there and wrote from there, and still he had the impacts from influences mostly from the French poets during the 19th century. But the thing is that the language itself, of course, it comes from a tradition that is very native to me. Like, it needs to be Portuguese tradition in a way. But then, the way or the perspective I have into the world and the poetry itself, of course, it is influenced by all these open possibilities that I find also through traveling, of course.
And you've also received the competitive grant for literary creation funded by the Ministry of Portuguese Culture. That must have been exciting.
Yeah, that's when I came back from China. Actually, I was pregnant in China. Then I had to come back to Portugal because I was having my baby. And then I was in Portugal. I had written partially this book, River Being Bodily God. But then I won this grant, and I kept on writing, and then the final product was a longer book.
Wow.
Because it includes my life during pandemic with a baby and stuff like that. So it became more interesting because of the fact that were occurring in the world, and that changed a lot my life as well. So this grant was it came in a very interesting time, and it was a great timing to write. Yes, definitely. I was very happy about that.
And what did you use the grant for? Because one could argue that there's publishing costs and whatever, but for poetry, you don't really need to spend much. You just sit and write.
But it is for that, it's practically just buys you time, and time is very important, especially in the culture that, we are always hurrying up to do things and doing so many things. We always have no time to do all that we want. Yeah. So, of course, having 12 months just to focus on writing poetry, that's important. And I hope that there's more kind of initiatives like this around the world, because we can't just, read the news. We also have to reflect about them, as William Carlos Williams said once. And this is something that needs to be done for sure. Some investment also in artists, in the creation, in literature, in poetry. This is important. This is important for someone who wants really to develop something in a literary world.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important that stuff like this exists. Do you think that generally art is appreciated by governments and just people in general?
No, usually no. I mean, but at least for the first part of the government. It's usually like, it's kind of a favor, right? And also looks good. So it's many times this kind of grants and everything are sort of propaganda for the government that is in power by the time. I understand that. But still, if we have some politics that can recognize the role that arts play in society, that's always good, no matter what they intended. The final result is if the artists can get a little bit of independency and autonomy to write or just to produce their art, then it is always good. Now, about the people reading it, that's the thing, it's not so market oriented as many other kinds of productions. So for sure, it needs kind of side help from institutional backgrounds. So, yeah.
Well, do you have any other upcoming projects or books or collections that you're working on?
Yes, so I just wrote a novel. It is also about my experience in China. Not also, because this is not about my experience in China. It's mostly about my experience as being pregnant and being a mom. But this one is completely about my experience in Beijing when I was living there for these past few years, and how it felt like so unreal and dystopian in a sense. And also I was reading at the time this amazing Chinese writer, novelist. Her name is Chen Xue, and she has a unique way of writing, and that inspired me so much that I felt like I need to do my own version of this. And wrote a novel for the first time. But I don't know when it's going to be published, so I'm just waiting for an opportunity to publish it.
In the meantime, where are we able to find River Being Bodily God and Red River, and basically all your projects that we need to find?
Yeah, so you can access this directly in the Red River Press publisher website, but also you can also purchase this on Amazon. It is available there for around the world. So this is basically for the English version. Those are basically the sources. Or if you are in India, you can find it in a bookstore, but you need to go to India.
Yeah, excellent. Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great having you on.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and have a good day.